You're listening to the Buyer's Mind Podcast, a podcast for internet marketers and business owners covering topics like psychology, sales, persuasion, and so on. Revealing what makes people buy. Here's your host, Juho Tunkelo.
Hello and welcome to the Buyer's Mind Podcast once again. My name is Juho Tunkelo and I'm your host. And this time is going to be a little bit different. Some time ago, I sat down with my longtime friend and fellow copywriter called Bruce Carlson, who is from the John Carlson school of copywriters, if you will. And I have really massive respect for his experience, his raw copy chops, and I just wanted to sit down with him a little bit and give you a taste of his talent for copy. And I think we had a really interesting conversation around the art of writing super converting headlines. It's a little bit rambly at times, but I think this is a little bit longer. Actually, 2-3 times longer than the usual episode. But I think we got a little bit deeper with this episode. And if you think about it, headlines are really everything. Anything online, especially, everything starts with a headline. Your AdWords ads start with a headline. Your Facebook ads start with a headline. Your blog posts start with a headline. And of course, your sales pages all start with a headline. So if you get the headline right, you have come a long way. Of course, that's not everything, but it remains the way to get attention and grab somebody's attention, and then you can lead them on towards the sale. Anyway, get ready for a really interesting and longish chat about headlines, and here we go. Okay, let's go.
All right.
Okay, this is Juho Tunkelo, and I'm speaking here with my good buddy Bruce Carlson. Say hi.
Hello.
And we're going to start with something really practical and usable that everybody needs, and that is the headline. And what makes a good headline, and where can you start? Bruce, you got some thoughts on top of your head?
Well, the first thing that I always would tell clients who are writing their own copy and want to write good headlines is that the headline is technically something that we use to weed out people who are not interested in our product. So as opposed to trying to make it general so we get this huge number of people to read our copy, the headline rather is a way of getting rid of those people who are not serious. So that's why we want to target the headline so carefully. And a good headline needs to be targeted directly at the customer, and that's why it needs to have a good strong benefit. That, to me, I'm a strong believer in a benefit-oriented headline, as opposed to a curiosity-driven headline where you try to get somebody's interest by dropping some serious things.
I think for a while there, a lot of marketers try to use headlines that give you a lot of promise, but don't really give you anything to sort of hang your hat on. So I have the similar opinion, and always not only to base it on a headline, but base it on a really strong. Base the headline on a benefit, but to base it on a really strong benefit. You can't really do a great headline if you don't have a great benefit. So you have to really dig deep and find the best one.
Yeah, so that means for business owners especially, is to really sit down and think about and brainstorm about the benefits of what you're selling. Because sometimes we don't always know exactly what every benefit is. And we may find a benefit that can really be used successfully in a headline. I'm trying to think of an example of that. The famous Rolls-Royce headline, for instance, about at 80 miles an hour, the only sound you hear is the ticking of the clock.
The sound of the electric clock, something like that, yeah.
And if we think about that, well, what's the benefit there?
Yeah.
Right? It's kind of hidden.
Yeah. But it's the one that actually means something for those people who would be potential Rolls-Royce buyers. Like you said, I mean, if Ogilvy hadn't targeted it for exactly those guys who are actually potential buyers, he would have, used something that would just as well sell a Bentley. But he would go and find those little small details that he could, spin something around, like it's so quiet you can only hear the electric clock. And it means that you can't get that from anywhere else. So this is for you, therefore.
Yes, you get the unique selling proposition starts to come in. Even is what is really special about your product that makes it stand out. And for that, sometimes you have to really dig down and do some research, like David Ogilvy did for Rolls-Royce. And those people wanted silence, didn't they? They wanted a quiet ride down the road, not to hear any of the sounds of the world out there. But, if we think of something, like a pain relief medicine, a headline for that. A famous one was just corns, ? And there, all of a sudden, the guy's corn starts to hurt. When he sees that, he goes, yeah, I've got that pain. This is going to help me. Somebody recognizes that. So sometimes the benefit can be just the fact that somebody else recognizes your problem and they might have a solution. So it doesn't have to always be a in-your-face benefit, but it's got to be something that the reader can tie into right away and identify with.
And speaking of the Rolls-Royce ad, I'm not completely sure, but I think the subheading mentioned something about just in passing that this is what's the term actually? What's the opposite of a chauffeur-driven car? I forget what the actual phrase was, but the
personal driven.
Maybe
self-driven,
something like that. Yeah. But anyway, the intention was to, again, make a distinction from those guys who this is for somebody who actually appreciates a fine car like that, instead of sitting in the back of a Bentley and somebody drives you around.
Yeah, and he's not talking about the powerful motor under the hood, and of course Rolls-Royce is a company that makes airplane motors. I mean, they make these incredible motors. So certainly Ogilvy could have also talked about how great the motor is, how long it's going to last. No, he chose to talk about the quiet ride, because these guys that he was targeting at, they've got so much money, they aren't really worried about those things. And Rolls-Royce, a lot of it has to do with the name itself, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. But so we think of that benefit that the headline speaks to somebody, and that means that we need to be able to put ourselves into our customers' shoes, don't we? Mm-hmm. And that's often a very, very difficult part. And for copywriters, that's why you need to know as much about your customer as you can. What are their emotional needs? What do they really What are they looking for?
Yeah.
Who are they? Right?
Right.
I mean, and we want to get it as focused as we can as to who these people are. Ogilvy knew who they were when it came to Rolls-Royce. If we're marketing a kitchen tool, we're probably not going after teenage boys, are we?
Yeah.
Probably not. We're going after, both men and women, but mostly to women within a certain age group, and we could probably even narrow that down. And then once we know that, then and we know what they're using it for, we're able to then write a headline that.
Yeah. And this headline was, I don't know when it was, probably in the 60s, I think.
I think it was, yeah, late
60s.
Yeah,
and at the time, I think Rolls-Royce was a bit of an underdog in terms of sales, and this ad something like quadrupled their sales or something. And even today, in their marketing, and every time I hear about somebody who is driven in a Rolls-Royce, talks about how silent it is. So they've been running the whole same benefit even to this day. So.
Even this, Ogilvy was just quite amazing, the man who wrote that, and he built an entire agency. I think that was one of the big ads that helped him build his agency, but he really distilling it. And that's what your headline is. It's a distilling or a concentrating of your whole kind of message, isn't it? Down to that one point. And, if you know your customer well, you know what they really, really deep down want, you can then put that in there,
And I think a really good headline, whatever it's sort of spun around, if it engages your imagination, then it probably at least keeps you reading and gets you curious without trying to trick you. But if like in this example, you start to think about how it would be to sit in a silent Rolls-Royce and hear basically nothing, and then you go from there.
Yeah, the picture. There's a picture that goes with that headline, and it immediately conjures up this picture of you driving down the road in this silent vehicle, happy as can be. I mean, there's so much more than just that.
Yeah, that's interesting, actually. Whenever I think of that headline, the picture comes right to mind. I'm sure it was chosen purposefully.
Yeah, and of course, a really, really great copywriter seems to have a special ability to do that. But even when we're writing headlines for our own small business, medium-sized business, whatever, if we're writing our own copy and we're not a heavy-duty pro like somebody like Ogilvy was, we can still, for our business, we should know our customers better than anybody else.
Yeah. And
so we should be able then to write that headline that distills that benefit down.
And if your product solves a problem, and you know that it does, and it does it really well, then if you can explain that problem better than your prospects would in a headline, then you're a couple of steps ahead of the game right there.
Yeah, sometimes your prospective customer, he needs or she needs to have it laid out for them. Mm-hmm. Maybe they have this vague idea in their head that they have a problem.
Yeah.
Your job then, as a marketer and copywriter, then is to kind of articulate it, to make it stand up. You have a picture that goes with it, something that makes it much more clear for them, and then at that point they go, "Aha, that's right. This person understands me." And if a prospect feels, if they have that sense of identification with you, and that all begins in the headline. The headline is the place, because you can lose them. You can lose somebody who would be a good prospect very, very easily. But at the same time, you're also trying to weed out those people who would not be prospects. So the clarity, that's why a headline needs to be nice and clear, I think.
I agree, and that was when I was starting out learning copywriting, and one of the things that I learned pretty fast was not to try too much. If I think it's a common mistake when you're learning to write headlines that you try to include 2, 3, 4 different ideas in a jumble of a mess, and you think it looks powerful, but when you actually hand it to someone and ask them to read it, it's like, what's the point? It needs to go straight through you, sort of.
Yeah, and if you try to put too many different ideas in there, like you say, it just ends up as a jumble, and then that confuses the person, and they go, well, I don't want to read any more of this. This doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
But getting right to the heart of the matter, generally speaking, if there's a problem you're trying to solve, well, that benefit is about solving that problem. You want to get right to the heart of the matter and get it there in the headline. But you need to work on it a little while. I don't think good headlines just come magically.
Yeah.
How long do you usually work on a headline, Juho?
Well, it depends, but I do maybe, I don't know how long, but I do like 10, 20 different versions, and then if I find a couple that are strong, then I work some more on those. I know some copywriters who do even like 50 or more, but for me, I think it's it's too much.
Yeah, I was 10 or 20. Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
25 max.
Yeah.
And then that can take some time. So, a few hours even sometimes, because you really have to, and then you can set it aside and then come back to it.
Yeah.
But in general, it isn't something that even the best copywriters cannot just sit down and magically pump out headlines. And that's why this headline writing software, things like this, is really no good, because all it does is takes headlines from the past, and then you're supposed to apply them to your product. Well, your product deserves better than that. But what about swiping headlines? Is that something that we can do, to swipe somebody else's headline and kind of tweak it for our product?
Well, I think it gets dangerously close to plagiarizing. It is a good way to learn the structure of a good headline, get an idea of how you can put it together. But I think you just do that to get a sense of how to do it.
Yeah, I think there are some that have been used so much that people recognize the formula. So you got to, if you're using something that's coming from a famous ad in the past, if people recognize that, or even unconsciously, you can shoot yourself in the foot, because then they'll go, oh, this is just something they borrowed from some place.
What was your version of the one about people used to laugh at me? And
they laughed when I said I wanted to be a comedian, but they're not laughing now. It's coming from Capel's famous headline, wasn't it? They laughed when I sat down at the piano, but when I started to play, and then ... implying that then all of a sudden they weren't laughing anymore. And that was a formula that was then used several times through the years in some way. I think the foreign language one, they laughed when I tried to speak French. I've seen that one. Mm-hmm. But when I opened my mouth, they laughed when I said I could speak French, but when I opened my mouth.
Okay. Do you think there's an ideal length for a headline, or is it down to just what it needs?
Well, I don't think it should be too long. Now, on the web, you see these really, really long headlines, sometimes 3-4 lines. And at that point, you can get tired just reading the headline, especially if it's in the big, bright red, print like you see on the web.
Yeah.
And that can just knock you over the head to the point where you don't even want to read any further. I think it should just be as long as it needs to be.
Yeah.
And in my own experience, I've never had to write a headline of more than, say, 10 words. I think that's the maximum I've ever had to write. But I would think that 10, 12 words, you ought to be able to get it in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when I see one of those really long headlines, it just feels like the copywriter was a little bit too lazy and either didn't know or didn't care to really work on it. And if you can format it well, like on a, let's say, on max 3 lines, and you craft it well, then I think it can be up to 17, even 20 words sometimes, but that's about as long as it should be.
Yeah, well, the Ogilvy headline, certainly, that's getting up around.
Yeah.
Long enough to get...
Long enough to round out the idea.
Yeah. And again, sometimes it doesn't need to be long at all, like the famous Corns headline. I mean, it depends again. And that's the thing. That's why with copywriting, hard and fast rules oftentimes are not good, because it depends on your product and your prospect, what your people, your audience, they're the ones. That's what we're looking at. And so if we think in terms of that, then it's better than thinking, the headline should be just exactly this many. Because it's the formula approach sometimes gets people in trouble, I think.
Yeah. I think when I look at fairly new companies, startups and whatnot, a lot of them, if they even use a headline, the sin that they have is like they have this fear of promising too much because they're in development. So I think a lot of them shoot themselves in the foot just because they, I mean, especially when we're talking like technology and software, it's never ready, it's never there. But you have to, if you have a solid idea for the product in the first place, and you're working towards it, and you want people to talk about it, then you need to have a headline that communicates that really strong promise or really strong benefit of what it would be, what your life would be after using this product.
Yeah, with a startup, I suppose that you have a sort of a special situation there, because you don't yet have an established prospect base even yet. So a lot of this is the very beginning. You're having to formulate a picture of your prospect based more on a vision of the prospect that you hope to have, in a way.
Yeah.
And that can be very, very difficult. I think for startups, it's a tough one to the marketing, because they often get it wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, you know this yourself, is that they act as if they've already been in business for many, many years,
Yeah. And they try to look bigger than they are and all those things.
Yeah, painting the picture, though, that's a great one for technology. I mean, because we know that almost all technology is designed to make things easier for us.
Yeah.
And yet again, so what exactly is the thing that this is going to make easier? And technically oriented people, or technologically oriented people, especially engineers, somehow have a hard time to put themselves in the shoes of the person who's going to be using it. They think in a sort of a different way. I mean, if you've been around engineers, my father was an engineer, and
yeah,
I have found that not many engineers really get the emotional idea of a headline.
Yeah,
a headline Has to be emotional, doesn't it?
Yeah.
There has to be an emotion involved.
Absolutely. And when you're building a product and you know every bit of it, the details, then you can have the risk of losing sight of why you were doing it in the first place. So that's why copywriters are needed.
Well, there's the base or core emotion, which the headline goes after, right? Ogilvy, now he understood how important this sense of isolation or kind of, it's almost like you're in your own little castle, isn't it? This quiet little castle. It's like a little tank in a way, you know, and the rest of the world doesn't exist when you're in there. For those men, they were undoubtedly at that time almost all men with, you know, substantial amounts of money to spend on something like that. It had to be an emotional appeal. I think sometimes we think, we can appeal with logic. I don't believe you can. I don't believe a headline can appeal with logic.
Yeah.
I think it has to target an emotion.
Yeah, and paint a picture of something that you haven't seen before, or you would certainly like to see. I mean, since we're on talking technology, I mean, Steve Jobs wasn't a copywriter, but still, he exhibited a lot of the same thinking, like 1,000 songs in your pocket. That's painting the picture.
Steve Jobs really understood how to appeal to the emotion of the prospects, and that's one of the reasons Apple has become such a giant. Is Jobs? He got it, you know.
Yeah, and he could turn around any dicey situation. You know, like I think it was iPhone number 4 or something that had a problem with the antennas, and then after a couple of weeks, Jobs came out there was a press conference, and then he turned the whole thing around and said, "Well, look at these poor Nokias and Blackberries. They're even worse." And he went on and on about it. And after he was through, he was like, "Well, okay, thank you for informing us, and where can we buy some more?" And he did that a few times. It is a skill that I think a good copywriter has to have, that to sort of when there's especially when there's a market where people assume certain things, that they are this way and they can't be another way. You have to find an angle, a hook that often through a story tells you a different outcome.
Yeah, isn't that really what a headline is doing? Is it's bringing you into the story. The only job of a headline, it's not to make a sale, is it? The headline is not there to make a sale.
No.
The headline is there to make you keep reading and to continue reading the rest of the copy. So that's something, at that point, is that if the headline speaks to your emotion, it speaks to your need, speaks to that pain point, possibly even. It can be something painful. Often that's a very emotional thing, pain, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that at that point, then you want to read more, and you're already halfway sold, because you're saying, aha, this is something that can solve my problem. A lot of times at that point, then people will read the headline, they'll pop down, they've already decided, and they go right down and look at the price. This is what you see on the web a lot. So, I think with the new iPhones, right? How much is this going to cost? I know I want one. I know it's going to make my life easier.
Do you think that there are many different formulas, as it were, to write headlines or approaches? I guess one of the evergreen ones is the how-to headline.
Yes, that's
how to yay without boo and all that. So, do you think that's maybe the easiest ones to get started with?
I think if there's the personal one is the one I think of for many people is easiest is to write it from the first person view. How I was transformed,
Right.
or how my life changed, because of this wonderful product or something like this. That can often be, that's a testimonial-based headline at times, where we actually use something from one of our satisfied customers. For a startup, that might be tough because you don't have a satisfied customer yet. But if you've already got a satisfied customer out there, you can turn their testimonial into the basis for a headline. And it works really great. The old one, the classic one, was about the canned peaches. It's the woman who canned the peaches and had all these cans of peaches, and it was her speaking.
Oh, yeah.
And she had, I forget if it was an advertisement for the jars or what it was, but it was all from her point of view. This lady out in the countryside who canned her own peaches, and so that way there, if you have one testimonial from a satisfied customer, you've got a way to use that to help you with your headline. I think that might be the easiest way.
Probably, yeah. And another way to use that is to turn it into a kind of a newsy headline that, this guy in this town did this, and...
That's another one, the news headline, right? Yeah. Woman cans more peaches in 1 week than most people do in 1 year.
Yeah.
So you make it like it's a newspaper headline. So it's announcing the news about man's corns relieved in record time, or something along this line. That can work, and I think that's another sort of classic formula for getting into it.
And while learning, these headline formulas, The Onion is a fun place to go. You have all these, they're having fun with all these kinds of things within their own way. Like, area man finds an afternoon not boring on a Saturday, something like that.
I think most of us have seen enough newspaper headlines in our lives that we have a sort of innate way to create a newspaper headline because we've seen so many of them.
Sure.
So, the news way of getting in, that maybe doesn't require quite as much work. So you could combine news then with the personal approach.
Yeah.
There's ways you can do that. Another one, the direct problem solver, right? If you take the headline as how I guess it's right along the same line as how my life was made better when I bought a Rolls Royce, something like that, right? So again, that's along the same lines.
Let's talk a little bit about different ways to create curiosity. I don't think it should be the only thing to do in a headline, but like the clickbait sites that are everywhere now that have utterly killed some of these ways, like this and this happened, but wait until you see what happened next. And
the teaser where they trying to string you, right, and get you to click through to the next page, right? They want to get the click. That's the web that's done that, hasn't it? And it's really gotten out of hand. But curiosity-driven headlines are old, faithful headlines too. Because again, a good curiosity-driven headline then gets the reader to keep reading, and you got their curiosity. And again, their curiosity is not going to be raised unless they are a prospective customer, unless they resonate with this in some way. So,
and one way to generate curiosity is to frame it as a question. The question, I don't know. You have to be careful about that. Sometimes I think you can abuse a question, and they're not always great headlines. But
what's a good example of a question headline? I mean, I mentioned that one. There's corns, but there's been some sort of classic headlines that were a question.
I'm trying to remember.
Does your child have these problems in school?
Right, yeah. Are you making these mistakes?
Are you making these mistakes in your copywriting?
Yeah.
Are you making these mistakes on the piano? Are you making these mistakes in your marketing? We see that a lot on the web. Mm. And then that gets the curiosity hackled, and you're going, well, am I making these mistakes? And gosh, I would like to know. I mean, at that point, I think most of us, if it's something that we are doing,
yeah.
But if you don't have a child, then you're going to stop reading that when you read that one headline. Does your child make these mistakes in school?
Yeah.
If you don't have a child in school, then you're going to check out, and that's what we want. We don't want those people to keep reading.
Are you making these 5 mistakes that in 90% of the cases lead to divorce? Are you going to read that if you're married?
Well, yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's an interesting kind of a twist, though, is how we use the curiosity without going overboard and not seeming manipulative. Because there's nothing worse than to feel manipulated by a copywriter. And I think a good copywriter doesn't underestimate the intelligence of his reader. He realizes that people are fairly sophisticated when it comes to reading, headlines and reading ads. It's, the advertising business has been around quite a while now. Mm. So people, they have their, shall we say, BS detectors going up right away. Their antennas are up, and they're looking for this, like, maybe they're looking for a reason not to continue reading, to see if you're selling snake oil or whatever you're pushing, Now, of course, if you're in this, what would you call it? This area of, what I want to say business building, but that's not the word I'm looking for, is the opportunity market, where working from home,
business opportunity,
this whole thing, which used to be done with space ads in the back of magazines, send for your free kit on how to make $100 a day collecting stamps, or something like this, right?
Yeah.
That market has a very different kind of a dynamic. And those people, even though they know that a lot of these opportunities are probably scams, they still go for it anyway.
Yeah.
Because they're hoping to find it. And they will try many, many, many of these various opportunities. And there are whole magazines dedicated to those people. That's a different market. But the average, somewhat conservative prospect, like for most people's businesses, they'll tune out in a minute. They've got a lot of marketing noise coming at them.
Yeah.
So your headline wants to break through the noise. That's another thing that it wants to do, which is a better reason for making it talk directly to the prospect.
And I think some of the best headlines that I like and have seen, especially in I don't know if it's even dependent on a market. They deliver a sense of the promise of relief, that they allude to a problem, or maybe they come out and say it. If you're a man over 40, you're probably going to have prostate problems, and are you prepared? And if not, then
well, there's the fear factor.
Yeah, that too.
So yeah, if you bring fear in, that's a good one. What do you think as far as when you write headlines, and certainly copy in general? Do you like to use fear to motivate?
I don't really like it, and for many years I actually refused to use it. But when it's well placed and it serves the reader, then it can be used.
Well, maybe with medical
Yeah.
issues, that could be something important.
Yeah, but I think if we're talking about business opportunity and instilling the fear of losing out, then it's kind of treading the line.
How to avoid bankruptcy is a great headline. That works.
Sure.
But are you doing this? If so, you'll probably go bankrupt. That's that's starting to push it a little bit.
Yeah. But on the other hand, if you're selling a system that is supposedly proven as a credit repair procedure, for example, then it could be justified.
Yes, it could be. I think I remember a web product that was sold about that, is that the FCC wants to shut down your site.
Uh-huh.
It was Sean Casey and somebody else that had put this together. He's a lawyer.
Yeah.
And it was a legal package showing you how to, keep from having your website shut down.
Yeah.
And there was a definite fear factor there at that point. Absolutely. I don't know. I think a lot of people bought the package because they were concerned. Now, whether or not the threat of it being shut down was actually true or not,
Yeah.
that's something. See that?
At least I'm covered. Yeah.
If the threat really is there, then perhaps the fear is just enough to jolt people. And in that sense, then they feel that you're helping them, and then they don't really worry about it. They don't feel tricked. And I think that's what we don't want. And clever headlines where we try to trick the reader into getting into reading further, and don't talk about the same thing. Perhaps an example might be a crazy headline that has nothing to do with the product, just to get people to sell, or just to get people to buy or to read. Most people are not going to go for that. They really get disgusted by that, feel tricked. I think the old one was sex. Now that I have your attention, and then going on, maybe once upon a time that was funny. But if you do that now, I think you're just going to get people disgusted by you.
And there you have it, the first part of my sit-down, my interview with Bruce Carlson on headlines. And we were just getting warmed up there, right, by the way. But I think it's better that we take a break here, and in the next episode, you'll get the rest of this interview. I hope you enjoyed it, and come back next week for another 45 minutes of headline talk. Okay, talk soon.